Again, before I start, a quick introduction of myself. As Joanne said, my name is Misha. I'm an engineer at a company called ChatID, where I've been working in front-end development primarily for the past 2.5 years or so, working with Backbone. And the reason I'm here to give a demo this evening, or one of the reasons is about 1.5 years ago, I used to be involved in get-togethers like this through an organization at NYU where I'd participate and bring together folks. Particularly, I helped out with an event called Demo Day, where the idea was to come bring people together and just have people show stuff off. So it's been some time since I've been involved in that space, but this was a great opportunity where I'm pleased to be welcomed to get to know all of you and kind of get back in that spirit of just kind of show off what you've been working on all day. So by the first slide, you should get a sense of where this is headed. I originally called the talk Read the Source, Luke, and then I started building the deck, and I realized, you know, I know a little bit about Star Wars, but what I know much more about is Spaceballs. So show of hands, who's seen Spaceballs? All right. Read the source, Captain Lone Star. So let's dive into this. Basic run through, as I just said, I'm gonna give a little intro about ChatID and Chatbar, the project I've been working on there, and then we're gonna get into reasons that you should read the source code. So ChatID plus Backbone, a match that has been intermixed to the point where, all right, we started using, so first let me give a quick background on ChatID. The company's been around for about 3.5 years. The whole entire premise behind ChatID is recognizing that in the landscape of kind of customer support chat and live chat with businesses, it's this really siloed and network of proprietary software that companies are using. So there's a lot of different chat platforms that are really just used in specific use cases like customer support, tech support on companies' own website, and they're all using proprietary closed source technology. The idea behind ChatID is what if we can plug into all those and integrate into one central open standard platform that is actually based around XMPP, an open standard for live chat and message exchange. So you can kind of think of it as what Twilio does with text messaging. This is for live chat with businesses. You could also call it the universal adapter for live chat with businesses. So one of the key things that ChatID brings to the table is we integrate with any big company, any big brand. We integrate directly with their live chat system. So get very specific about this. One of the customers we work with is Walmart, and another one we work with is Samsung. So we work with Samsung. We plug into their live chat system that they're already using, say on Samsung.com. But we also partner with Walmart, where we can deploy a JavaScript app, which I'm going to demo here in a second, that enables the end user who's shopping on Walmart to actually have a chat directly with a Samsung representative, something that without kind of bridging this gap wasn't possible before. So I'm going to jump into a quick demo here to illustrate the capabilities behind this, and also to start giving you a sense of Chatbar, which is the core focus of this. So when you click Chat with Samsung, Chatbar slides onto the screen. All of this is pretty lightweight Backbone. The idea was keep it as light as possible. It's going to be embedded on a retailer site with lots of traffic, and it needs to be very performant and responsive. Right away, you may notice kind of similar to like Facebook Chat or GChat. Focus was to make something that people would get right away. So if I click Start Chatting, this illustrates the ChatID technology. I pulled up an interface here that is called LivePerson. It's one of the very many live chat providers that exists in the market that ChatID hooks into. And so you can imagine this is a Samsung agent answering this chat. Samsung on Walmart.com. Message is coming over the wire over the ChatID universal adapter. Yo, 46-inch or 60-inch? 60 def. So boom, Samsung just closed another customer. All right, so enough about the product. Start talking about kind of the code behind it, the Backbone, and my experience working with Backbone to develop this. So project development started maybe 2 years ago. It actually kind of plateaued about a year ago to make this what we see today. But the approach was really, again, take this lightweight framework that's not too opinionated and can provide these basic MVC patterns to facilitate the core needs of an application like this. Some of the things that we do with it is we allow the user to then browse from page to page while they're having this conversation, maybe look at multiple products at once. And so we leverage backbone models to serialize all the state of this application and store that in a local persistence so that we can synchronize this as the user's browsing around. Cool. So that kind of transitioned us into the second half of this, which really goes into my experience. One big trend I learned when developing this application and using Backbone and really trying to get a grasp for all the inner workings and make sure it performed exactly as we needed it to. So, everyone know who this is? Never underestimate the power of the source. Lone Star. So I'm just going to run through, we'll take a step back. What do I mean by read the source? About, I don't know, 6 months into developing ChapR, I was kind of going back and forth between Backbone documentation. You know, it's very easy to find yourself just kind of looking up methods as you go, knowing exactly how things are working together. And at a certain point, I think someone else was directing me towards this, or maybe I stumbled across it on my own, but I started thinking, you know, I've got this backbone.js file in my library folder. I could just go in there and see what happens. And it didn't totally strike me at first, the significance of that, but I'm going to talk through some of the reasons I think that's a pretty useful thing for someone, especially someone starting out in development and you're thinking, okay, you just wire a bunch of libraries together and then you got your app. It's kind of a big moment when you realize those libraries have a lot of important things that are happening inside of them. Maybe some things that aren't totally necessary, maybe some things that you can do better yourself. And really the core point of this is don't be afraid to dive in there and see what's going on underneath. So I'm going to go through why should you read the source, at what point does it make sense to say, okay, I'm going to spend some time reading source code, and then what mindset do you want to have when you're going through it. So the first bullet on why it's useful to read the source code is to develop familiarity. So this is kind of a low-pressure way you can think about it, as you're not trying to understand exactly everything that's going on inside the source of Backbone. And so I'll pull this up here. This is the Backbone source file. Quick show of hands, how many people have poked around in here? Okay, pretty solid. For those of you that didn't raise your hands, first thing you do after this talk, pull this open and start. Just don't even read it, just scroll down and be like, okay, this section of code, got it, all right, okay. No, but really leisurely skim through and you'll start to recognize kind of common trends. You'll see things that, oh, I've seen that in other places. The first thing that jumps out at me is this whole monster of a what the hell is going on here, but this has nothing to do with Backbone. It took me a while until I realized this whole module world that was not super cohesive, and that's why we just wanted every library to be able to play in each world. So then I kind of got an idea about that, and then gradually over time it was, okay, there's CommonJS, there's AMD, and then they made UMD and all that. But it really started with seeing this in various places. You start going down at the top of the file, you see a reference to slice, a reference to splice, a reference to array. Why would they really do that? I don't know. I'm not going to answer that question immediately, but I've made a mental note of that being a pattern in these libraries. Scrolling down further, slice.call arguments. You'll see that one in many places. One other one I was going to call out here is hooking onto functions and injecting some logic in the course of that function being called later. So let's see, jumping back to the next slide. This is kind of in the same mindset. Learning never stops. Develop familiarity, but this learning never stops part is, especially if you're going to be in software development, and particularly if you're going to be in JavaScript development, you know every day you hold your breath as you look at Hacker News and wonder what you're going to have to pick up the next day. Oh, this is one of my favorite scenes. When is now, then, just before. So somehow I thought that fits with you. You're always trying to figure out where you are. Things like code. So learning never stops. If you're looking through source code, you're embracing this mindset of there's always going to be more things that I'm going to pick up here and there. So whether it's kind of the structure of how the library is assembled, with a bunch of core classes. They're all attached to some namespace. Code style, so patterns for putting all the variables at the top and how to name them. Sometimes you'll find design patterns as you go to start synthesizing what's happening in the source code. And then I have add topics to your Google It queue. So at a certain point, actually taking a step back, this reminds me of when in my wee early days of programming, the PHP days, we were all there, right? PHP days. I was thinking, if this PHP thing, it can build all these scripting things, it can do all the things that generally come up for jobs on Craigslist. So if I just learn this PHP thing, I am set for life, and I am so good. I can do the full stack, and I'd be unstoppable. So getting past that point into this mindset of add topics to your Google It queue is really kind of landmark point in your engineering aspirations, in that you kind of accept the fact that there's always going to be new things for you to pick up, and it really, describing it as a queue kind of takes the pressure off of, oh, I need to learn all of these things right now in order to piece it all together, in order to understand the whole picture. You're not going to understand the whole picture right off the bat. Create a queue, start putting things on it, even if it's just a mental note of, oh, I've seen that before. Then when you see it again, maybe you've seen it enough times, you're like, okay, I'm going to go spend 5 minutes and read about that. And that's just the general. If you get in that mindset, that it makes it much less burdensome to feel like you're up to speed and always kind of staying current with things. All right, another reason you want to read the source code: debug faster. So this is not cut and dry. Sometimes if you're too obsessed with what's going on in the source code and you start debugging, you might go into a rabbit hole and then start making commits to Backbone, and then you forgot what you were working on in the beginning. But definitely, if you can stay disciplined with it, having a sense of the exact code paths going on beneath your application is really significant for being able to debug issues. So to illustrate this, I jumped into the Backbone to-do example app, where you should all be pretty familiar with this interface, where they illustrate building a to-do app in different JavaScript frameworks. And so I've set this one up. I've actually accidentally put a bug in it that I'm going to illustrate why it's useful for me to have an understanding of the source code in order to resolve it. So one thing that was part of this app is if you have white space at the end of an entry, it will trim that for you. Now it looks like it's trimmed as I've moved away from it, or blurred away from the input, but if I open this back up, this white space is still there, which seems really weird. I want the white space to go away. Seems super trivial, but you'd be surprised how many of you are guilty of this when you're developing UIs. So you're wondering, okay, how do I make sure that white space isn't there? I go back to my source code, and there's this close function that happens on the blur event. And I'm going in here and I'm reading through exactly what's happening. Okay, if it wasn't editing, we don't care, but if it was, then we go further. If there was a trimmed value, okay, we want to save this trimmed value to the state. Okay, it all seems well and good. But having this mental model of what's actually happening during model.save, going into the source code and knowing this is going to set the attributes to the model, and if there are any changes, it's going to trigger a change event. Leads to the understanding, of course, you got to be a little more in the context of this application and how the data is flowing. But one key aspect of this is that the render event only gets called on change. And so with this white space issue, the fact that we're setting the trimmed value, even though all we did was add white space, means the change event is never firing because it never changed from what it was before. So that's why I picked this out, because there's actually a comment of this in the code, which I'm sure was originally an issue until they came across it and said, we got to add this in and fix it. So these are the types of areas where you don't want to waste too much time going off the deep end trying to solve this little white space issue. But if you have that sense of, oh, the change event happens during save, you could cut some significant time that way. All right. A couple more and we'll be wrapped up here. Okay, this is probably the most classic example and the most fitting visual for this. So contribute, we're all kind of familiar with open source and the fact that you can dive into libraries and you can make pull requests on GitHub and you can be a part of the library as a whole. But what's great about this visual is you could have a big, strong comb and actually be shipping the source code, pushing the new versions, or you could be like myself with a smaller comb here and you go over to the, let's see, all right, there's a few where there's comments from mponazil. But even then, there are things that I was able to help out with. See, even Adam gives me props for pointing out that they can use this plugin. And this is just a practice of you want to move the library forward, even the smallest things of being up to speed on the issues, being up to speed with the things people are talking about, and being able to just post comments in these areas is really stems from being willing to jump in and understand the library at its core. And then if you're really cool, you'll understand the library so well that you can be maintaining it and actually shipping new commits on it. So sure, it's great. We want to read the source code, but I'm not going to take my day off work so I can spend time derping around in backbone.js. So when do I actually think to do this? When you're debugging, I mean, you're probably doing a time waste with that anyway. Take the time to actually see what's going on underneath. When you're looking through tutorials and it says, do this thing, well, okay, do that thing, then maybe go look at what that thing does underneath. You don't have to know exactly what it does, but at least expose yourself to it, get into the habit. Maybe dedicate a study session or part of your break to actually say, okay, I'm going to finally understand how Backbone's collection set works, which is not too crazy once you wrap your head around it, but you want to allocate some time, and that'll really ease the kind of overhead when you're needing to depend on it. And another big one is when you're, especially in JavaScript, new tools are coming out every day. Everyone finds a way that they can make something more modular and ship it out and share it. But then you get this challenge of, okay, I need this new capability, and there's 3 libraries for it. This one has 27 stars. This one has 103. This one has 205. I'm not entirely sure which one to use. You kind of look for different signs. But if you're willing to go in there and say, oh, here's the source code, here's how it presents itself, here's some practices that I know are strong, you can really use that for evaluating new libraries and taking new things on. Finally, how do you approach it? Well, there's not just one way, as I was kind of saying before, as to when you want to do it. The how of going through the code, there's different context demand are good for different approaches. So quickly, just skim it through like I was showing before. Just kind of see what's there. Or maybe slowly and patiently, and you're really trying to get a sense of you're really trying to get a sense of what's actually happening there. And that's really valuable, but it's also going to take a lot more time. If you're going to spend that time, you might as well really understand what's going on. And finally, probably all our favorites is critically and arrogantly. When you're thinking, you know, this library is bulk full, and I am going to make it 10 times better, that is perfectly acceptable strategy for approaching the source code, because that's how we get better. It's also how we get a little sidetracked, but it's a great practice. All right, guys, so that's all I got for you, and maybe the source be with you, Lone Star.
Thank you, Misha.